watching CBS News, continuing coverage of America at war.
This CBS News special report is part of our continuing coverage of America at War. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
It's 5 p.m. in New York. It is 4 p.m. in Houston. It is 2 p.m. in Los Angeles. 1 a.m. in Baghdad. Headlines about the war at this hour. Just in, Turkey's foreign minister says his country will enter northern Iraq whenever it wants, despite U.S. urgings that it not do that. Turkey agreed earlier today to limited air rights for U.S. aircraft. In the skies over Baghdad, shock and awe, as the Defense Department calls it. The U.S. unleashed its full-fledged air war on Iraq. Not complete full-fledged, no E-bombs that would knock out all the electricity would drop, but over 320 Tomahawk cruise missiles hit Baghdad. There were airstrikes in other parts of Iraq, particularly up north around Kirkuk and Mosul. Parts of the presidential complex in Baghdad were among the targets hit today. So was at least one of the ministry buildings. The U.S. says these attacks are aimed at pressuring Iraqi commanders into surrendering. In a way, it was an incentive to do so, saying, listen, if you want more of this to continue, then you just refuse to surrender. If you want it to stop, then run up the white flag. Today's attack was spearheaded by Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from warships in the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, but also the fixed-wing aircraft from carrier decks and elsewhere were involved for the first known time in an attack on Baghdad during this war. On the ground, large numbers of Iraqi troops have surrendered to advancing Allied troops. The forward guard of U.S. forces, the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division, are now they're more than 100 miles into southern Iraq, about a third of the way to Baghdad. At this rate, and taking into account that they're having to take in some surrendering troops and some refugees, they could be in Baghdad in another 2 or 3 days if they continue to travel at this rate. The 3rd U.S. Army Division is still west of the Euphrates River. So far as we can make out, it has not yet crossed the river into the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, which would be a somewhat easier and more direct route to Baghdad for them. There have been battles involving Iraqi ground forces, including some tanks, we are told, engaging the U.S. 3rd Army Division. Those pictures you saw were pictures of Iraqi troops, most, if not all of them, troops from the lower end of the Iraqi military, the so-called Iraqi People's Army. Republican Guards moved in to one of the key cities along the Euphrates River to help bolster there, keep morale up and try to keep the Iraqi troops there from surrendering. We'll have more about that later. Here at home, there were some anti-war protests from the Pacific Northwest eastward to Washington, D.C. today. Dozens of arrests were reported. For reaction in Washington to these developments, and particularly this new development coming out of Turkey, in which the Turks say they will go into northern Iraq, we go to Bill Plant. Bill?
Well, Dan, the latest from a senior administration official: for the Turks to move into northern Iraq would be, quote, a big mistake. This reflects the level of tension between the U.S. and Turkey in talks that have stretched out now for days. The Turks, as you pointed out, want to put their troops in northern Iraq. They claim to keep the Iraqi Kurds, the Kurds who are in Iraq, from crossing over as refugees into Turkey. The Kurds, of course, have a different view of it, believing that Turkey wants to keep them in line. The U.S. is without significant leverage here, or at least not as much as it would have had if the deal for economic aid to Turkey in exchange for basing rights had gone through. But of course, as we know, Turkey's parliament defeated that several weeks ago. We do now have air rights as of today, the overflight rights, but the basing deal is off, and with it, the very large economic aid package that would have gone with it, and that significantly reduces U.S. leverage. The talks continue, perhaps the threats, we should say. The warning from here, Dan, was it would be a very big mistake.
Bill Plant at the White House. Let's go back to Alan Pizzi, reporting live from northern Iraq. It was Alan who first reported to us the possibility of Turkish troops moving into Iraq. Well, now that the Turkish foreign minister has said that Turkey will do that, Alan, let's lay out for our viewers what could be next in the part of Iraq you're in. And I want to remind people you're dressed in warm clothing because where you are, a long way from the southern desert, is a mountainous region in which the weather gets cool this time of night.
Dan, it's really cold here, quite frankly. What we can expect here, I think, if the Turks come in, is an awful lot of trouble. The Kurds simply do not trust them. And quite frankly, Dan, the Turks don't have the reasons for coming in that they claim. Firstly, they say they're worried about an independent Kurdish state, but the Kurdish leaders, along with the rest of the Iraqi opposition, have stated publicly, both in writing and verbally, that they have given up the idea of an independent Turkish state. Their policy is to be part of a federal, democratic, pluralistic Iraq, a unified state with its borders held sacrosanct. They say they don't want their own state. They also talk about, the Kurds talk about there's no need for the Turks to worry about an influx of refugees into Turkey. They point out that this is not the northern Iraq of 1991. This is an organized place. It's got a functioning economy. It's got a functioning government. It's got democracy. These people are prepared, well prepared, or as well prepared as they can be for refugees fleeing. They say they won't flee because there's no reason for them to. And quite frankly, Dan, I covered that exodus in 1991 into Turkey, and I don't think that any Kurd wants to go back to Turkey. I was in a camp on the Turkish side of the border, and U.S. Special Forces came in and forced the Turkish soldiers out of that camp because of the way they were treating Kurdish refugees. The Kurds have good reason to fear the Turks. But that said, the opening up of those air corridors is useful in more ways than one. It's not just for fighter planes and bombers to come in. There are 3 good airports here in Kurdish-controlled areas that can be used by U.S. military planes. There are 3 of them, and they're ready to go right now, Dan, and they can be used.
Alan Pizzi reporting live from northern Iraq. And ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who've been saying, well, what does this have to do about the war? If you care about what U.S. troops, airmen, Marines, sailors are doing in this war, if you care about the United States effort in Iraq, it's critical for citizens in this country to understand what's at stake in northern Iraq. Now, the developments of the last few minutes have been, Turkey says that its troops would enter northern Iraq to prevent an influx of refugees across its borders, but, and this may be important, it gave no date for an incursion that the United States has made clear again this afternoon it opposes. Turkey's armed forces, according to the Turks, would also enter the Iraqi-Kurdish enclave to prevent what it calls terrorist activity. Now, as a background, we're going to bring in Richard Holbrooke, former United States Ambassador to the United Nations, former high-ranking official in the State Department, and one of America's leading authorities on foreign policy. Thanks for being with us. Put this in perspective for us, this business of the Turks saying, listen, we'll go into northern Iraq when and if we please.
Well, first of all, the war appears to be going pretty well right now, and that's the first thing that's important to all of us, and I hope and pray that it'll be a quick and successful war with limited casualties on both sides, because that is critically important, not only for the future of Iraq after Saddam, but for the issue you've just raised, Dan. The Turks have a huge stake in their own mind in what happens in northern Iraq. They entered Iraq and went in 30 to 40 miles when I was Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs in 1995-96. And we had a hell of a problem dealing with that, trying to get them out in a peaceful way. I have no doubt that Alan Pizzi is correct when he says that they see a strategic interest of their own in protecting their interests in northern Iraq, not seeing Turkey have separatist tendencies, and the U.S. is quite right to try to minimize or prevent that.
Mr. Ambassador, can Iraq be rebuilt? Can Iraq have a new free government with Turkish troops in northern Iraq?
Not in the long term, but in the short term, if the Turks come in a limited way, under clear mandate, and they don't get into a fight with the Kurds, and they don't go too far south, that's one thing. If, on the other hand, they go all the way to Kirkuk or Mosul, cities which many Turks think are historically theirs, we're going to have a big problem, and holding Iraq together will be more difficult. On the other hand, in the long run, let's face it, the United States is leading the coalition which is in the process of liberating Iraq, and they will be able to control this situation.
Well, we've seen
By
this
they, I
afternoon.
mean us.
Excuse me, Mr. Ambassador. We've seen this the situation complicated this afternoon by the Turks saying what they said. The Iranians, who have from their viewpoint, a big stake in what happens in northern Iraq, can they or can they not be expected to stay out of this?
Well, Iran has got its own vested interests with Shiites and Sunnis and their own minorities. But I want to underscore one point here. All of this reinforces the importance of this war being as quick as possible. I can only hope and pray that the Iraqi generals recognize that their cause is hopeless and they abandon Saddam Hussein, get rid of him themselves, or cut a deal with the Americans who are currently in secret communications with them in order to prevent the very bad eventualities that you are speculating about. I'm not quite as pessimistic as you imply in your questions, Dan, and I know that doesn't mean you hold those views. You're just asking questions. And the reason I'm not is that I think that the sheer power of power itself will have a political effect as it proceeds. So I'm optimistic about the war, although the issues you raise are critical for its future after Saddam.
Ambassador Holbrooke, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. When Ambassador Holbrooke and others talk about, quote, the war going well, in many ways very well, one of the things they're talking about is the bombing campaign today in Baghdad, in which we'll show you some of the scenes of what happened earlier today in Baghdad. The first hit in Baghdad today was by far the biggest and the most destructive, but there were two other periods of bombing. These were the sights and sounds in Baghdad as about 320 Tomahawk cruise missiles fired from sea hit the city, along with specifically guided bomb attacks from fixed-wing aircraft. And while this was the beginning of what the Defense Department has long heralded as its air campaign, an A-Day for Air Campaign Day, attack of, quote, attack and awe, it was not the full force aerial campaign, because as we've mentioned before, but for those of you joining us late, the so-called E-bomb, which is capable of turning off anything with a transistor, anything electric in Baghdad, was not used today, but plenty of air power was used. Mostly, from everything Washington has said, this was designed to keep Saddam Hussein and his loyalists separated from the Iraqi people, separated from their command and control centers, also to encourage the ranking members of the Iraqi military to give up. That there's been a slowly increasing air campaign, climaxing, for the moment at least, with this one today, saying to those Iraqi military leaders, in effect, listen, this air campaign can go on for quite a while. You get to choose. Do you want more of this, or do you want it to end? Byron Pitts is with the, Phil Ittner is with the 3rd Infantry Division, Lieutenant Colonel Dan Williams, an Apache longbow pilot engaged in action outside Al-Nazarif. He also made a hard landing in Iraq some 20 hours ago. Phil, come in and tell us what this young American hero knows.
Well, then, this Lieutenant Colonel who's with me here in southern Iraq has actually engaged Iraqi forces just this evening, meeting, as I have reported earlier, some resistance. I am being told by military intelligence officials here that this is a three-pronged attack on Nasiriyah, that they are using air power, bombing runs, basically, some close air support, which would be these AH-64 Apaches that I'm with, and then, of course, ground elements. And with me here is the Lieutenant Colonel who flies one of these attack helicopters, which has been engaged in and around Al-Nazariyah this evening.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel Williams, it's Dan Rather, and if you have the phone now, let me ask you some questions. What kind of combat have you been engaged in?
Yes, sir. It's been against what I would describe to be a determined enemy. The judgment of the ground fire, as well as some of the surface-to-air missiles that our flight received this evening. We were able to destroy a good number that we came into contact with. And in fact, I have a company that's out right now doing that itself.
Lieutenant Colonel, there is some noise in the background. It may be desert wind, maybe small arms fire, I don't know. But if you could work that telephone fairly closely, that would be much appreciated. And when you said that there was ground-to-air missile fire against the Apache longbows, this was Iraqi fire of what description?
Yes, sir. I think shoulder fired. We had one, matter of fact, in my direction this evening, and we were able to evade successfully due to the longbow systems on board. And I think all in total, probably 5 were fired in our direction.
Have you and or others knocked out Iraqi tanks, or is it a case of knocking out other targets?
It has, as far as this evening, sir, several tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and some surface air type vehicles.
You had a hard landing in Iraq about 20 hours ago. Tell me about that.
Yes, sir, we did. We were very proud to take part in the opening shots of the air war, and very successful combination of artillery and longbow fires with 1-3, the 3rd Division. Then when we went out, sir, the Apaches in front of me were engaging with Hellfire missiles at various targets. Immediately behind them, they began to take fire. My backseater and I began to return fire, and at that time we had an electrical failure of all the components forward of the nose, basically the night vision system, which puts you in about 100 feet off the deck at 100 knots, trying to right an aircraft in the dark. Due to some valiant efforts of my backseater, he basically landed the aircraft at about 2 Gs into a sand dune and listed about 35 degrees to the right. After making some appropriate calls and assessing damage, which was very little, we were able to restart the aircraft and eventually fly away. I'm happy to say also that our ground component linked up with us, and that was very moving. And in fact, we flew the aircraft tonight.
We're talking live with Lieutenant Colonel Dan Williams, of an Apache longbow pilot with the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division. Lieutenant Colonel, I know for security reasons you can't talk much about location, but we've been saying that the 3rd Infantry is still, as of this moment, operating mostly, if not entirely, west of the Euphrates River, and can you confirm that?
So I can confirm that we've probably crossed over that at this time, but that's all I could say at this point.
The 3rd Infantry has crossed the Euphrates River at this time. Thank you for giving us that information because it's new to us. Now, I want to get back to the description of the combat you're in. Not everybody knows, but a lot of people do, that the job of the Apache longbow is to go out ahead of U.S. armor and infantry fighting vehicles to, in effect, clear the way, to wipe out tanks, enemy troop carriers, any other targets that might give trouble. Now, you've said that you were fired on. Has there been, have you seen, or do you know of an actual tank-to-tank battle in the desert so far?
Yes, sir, I can confirm that that did occur last night on the opening shots, tank-to-tank, and they were dispatched very quickly by American M1s from the 3rd Division.
So American 3rd Division Infantry Division tanks engaged Iraqi tanks at least somewhat last night. You said they prevailed. And you and other longbows have knocked out tanks along the way also. Is that the case?
Yes, sir, that is.
Have you been, or do you know of any operations inside El Nasiriyah itself? The only reports we have are those of fighting outside El Nasiriyah. Do you know of any inside that city?
Not at this time, sir. I know there's some problematic targets, human shield type things that I can't go into on this net, but we'll work through that, sir, and do it with honor.
I understand. Now, he said that is, you said, Lieutenant Colonel Williams, that there had been, quote, determined resistance. Is that determined resistance, quote unquote, finished or continuing, or hard to tell?
It's hard to tell, sir, and we're, of course, taking every step with determination. We do not underestimate this enemy, and nor do we value, of course, our lives fairly highly. But we're doing the right things. The team is working together very well, the air, the ground, the Marines, and we do not underestimate the enemy, and he is fighting.
Lieutenant Colonel Dan Williams, where are you from, Colonel?
Sir, originally from Colorado.
Well, first of all, we're very glad that you survived that, quote, hard landing there in the desert. You're still alive and fighting. We also want to tell you personally and directly that we appreciate your service to our country. We wish you continued Godspeed and safety, and if there's anything I can do for your family, please tell me now directly, and you can consider it done.
I just want to tell the American people it's our honor to do this. If they could see what we've seen in the last few days, they'd be filled with pride, and we do this for them.
Colonel, thank you very much. And one last question. Have you seen any Iraqi troops surrendering to the 3rd Infantry or to anyone else?
No, sir, I can tell you that that is one thing that we have not seen this time, although we have heard sporadic reports of different types of units giving up. I can tell you the ones that we engaged tonight were not giving up.
You say you can tell me that they're not giving up, which is to say that some of them are fighting fiercely.
Yes, they are.
Lieutenant Colonel Dan Williams of Colorado, thank you for being with us. And Phil Ittner, if you're still there, we thank you as well. And Phil, do you have anything else to file at this moment?
Yes, Dan.
Anything else to file?
I apologize. At this point, Dan, basically what I can tell you is pretty much what we've already said and what the Lieutenant Colonel has told us. There is some resistance around Al-Nasiriyah.
All right, now what we get out of that is new information. Thank you very much, Phil Ittner. We'll be back in touch. Phil's been reporting to us live throughout the afternoon. He will continue throughout the evening with first-hand information. Now, what we've learned the last few minutes about the ground war, the air war continues, the heaviest day of air attacks in Iraq. It's still plenty of nighttime left in Iraq and plenty of time for other air attacks, including some on Baghdad, to occur, although we do not know that that's going to happen. But on the ground, we now learn, one, the 3rd Infantry Division has crossed the Euphrates River. Again, let's go to the map here, if we may, and show you where they are and why that could be important. We've been saying that the 3rd Infantry Division has been west of the Euphrates River. This is the Euphrates, this is the Tigris. The Tigris runs through Baghdad. And the 3rd Infantry Division has been west of the Euphrates, and we were wondering when or if they would cross the Euphrates somewhere roughly in this area, because it's a more direct route and, frankly, hopefully an easier route to the gates of Baghdad up through here. Now, we've just learned from the Lieutenant Colonel flying that Apache longbow that what he would say and all he would say is, yes, elements of the 3rd Infantry have now crossed the Euphrates and are operating in what's called the Mesopotamia Valley, which is the Tigris and Euphrates River Valley. So they've crossed over. That's number one. Number two, there have been tank battles in this area. There was some last night. Iraqi tanks challenged American Abrams tanks, and the Abrams, along with the help of the tank-killing Apache helicopters, prevailed. Number three, in the town of Al-Nasiriyah, which is roughly in this area. We don't have it on this map, but I'm going to say roughly here, where intelligence had indicated that the Iraqi forces there might give up. The Lieutenant Colonel with the 3rd Infantry told us in no uncertain terms that they have not given up, and while he wouldn't go into detail, he said that there were some, quote, problematic targets in there, which he suggested means that there's some targets in there in which human shields, Iraqi human shields, have been placed around those targets. It'll be interesting to see what develops from that. All of which is a reminder that war is hell. Anthony Mason has a report on the family of one of the American soldiers killed in yesterday's helicopter crash. Anthony.
Dan, among the 6 U.S. fatalities so far in this war was 30-year-old Captain Ryan Beaupre of St. Anne, Illinois. He was the pilot of the CH-46 helicopter that crashed last night, killing 8 British Marines and 4 U.S. Marines. The Beaupre family said they had an uneasy feeling last night when they heard the C-Knight helicopter had gone down. And when the dog started barking outside the Beaupre home at 3:15 this morning, Ryan's father said to himself, there they are. He went to the door, and there were 3 Marines who gave him the news. Elise Beaupre remembered her brother today.
This fall, we saw him do that. That was pretty exciting. He's always been a very disciplined athlete. He's smart, handsome, very private person. He would probably have a heart attack right now if he knew we were doing this.
Ryan Beaupre had worked as an accountant, but decided he wanted to do something more with his life and joined the Marines. He was also an avid surfer. He used to say he was married to the Marines and having an affair with his surfboard. Dan?
Anthony Mason. And our condolences to that family and to the families of those who've been lost. There have been 2 U.S. Marines known to have been shot to death in combat in Iraq so far. The air attacks in Iraq have been the heaviest of the war thus far today. The U.S.-led ground operations continue to drive toward Baghdad. You're watching CBS News continuing coverage of America at War. Back at CBS News World Headquarters in New York, these are among the headlines of the hour. The U.S. 3rd Infantry Division has crossed the Euphrates River. They have experienced fierce fighting, including some tank battles last night. There has been determined resistance in and around El Nasiriyah, the city which was on the west bank of the Euphrates River. The lieutenant colonel who reported to us from the 3rd Infantry said he's seen no surrendering of Iraqis in that area. There has been some surrendering of Iraqi troops further south of there, and also some human shields are believed to be protecting targets in El Nasiriyah. I emphasize that so far as we can make out, these human shields are Iraqis who, volunteers or otherwise, are around military targets, which is one reason the military targets have not been attacked inside of Nasiriyah. Now, here on the home front, the start of hostilities with Iraq has led to stepped-up worries about security, perhaps nowhere more than in the city that took the brunt of September 11th attacks. Aaron Moriarty has more on the anxieties in New York City.
6,000 miles from Baghdad, a city jittery for months about possible terror threats now braces for the worst.
We have been targeted in New York City 4 times in the last decade, unlike any other city in America.
New York City Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly has been described as obsessed with preventing further terrorist attacks.
It's something that we have to be focused on and totally involved with.
So as America goes to war, Kelly and his department have gone into high gear. At an undisclosed location, a counterterrorism command center deploys heavily armed officers, known as Hercules teams, to possible targets throughout the city.
I don't think it's a certainty, but it's something that we have to be prepared for. It's kind of common sense to have some additional safeguards in place.
American cities are better prepared to combat terrorism, although not as prepared as some would like. Congress has yet to turn over federal money to pay for equipment like radiation detectors and chemical suits for firefighters and emergency workers. Although there is one place in this country that has received federal funding.
Congress, in its wisdom, saw to it that Washington received additional resources for protection. No other American city did.
You think it might have something to do with the fact Congress is in Washington?
Could be, I don't know. Call me crazy, but it might,
might have something to do with that.
The fight against terrorism is guaranteed to be a long one. And Americans, 6,000 miles from the conflict in Iraq, may find themselves living a lot like those who live only 600 miles away.
Israelis are a strange breed of people. They live under threats to their lives on a daily basis all the time.
Political writer Mika Helprin, who lives both in New York and Jerusalem with his wife and infant son, says he feels safer in Israel, where terrorist acts have become a fact of life.
Israel controls and understands terror much better than the United States does. The United States is a much more open target. Freedom is much more taken for granted there.
Make sure that you have no keys on you.
We're involved in a long-term war here. This is not something that is going to end irrespective of what happens in Iraq. We're going to be fighting a very cunning and patient foe.
Aaron Moriarty, CBS News, New York.
Fuad Ajami here in our studio. What about that remark from the New York City Police Commissioner that whatever happens in Iraq, we're still in for a long, hard war against terrorism?
These are 2 tributaries. Perhaps they come from one river, the frustrations in the Arab Muslim world. But Iraq is one issue, and Al-Qaeda and the terrors of Al-Qaeda and the foot lancers and the free, if you will, these young people available for these missions of terror, it's a very different issue.
Fuad Ajami, thanks, and stick with us here because there's a lot of ground to cover today. CBS News continuing coverage of America at War will roll on. We have new information, fresh information from the ground war. The air war seems to be in a pause moment at this hour, but it's still dark. Early morning, just past midnight by about an hour in Iraq. So we'll see what develops in the coming hours, both on the ground and in the air, as we cover America at War.
This CBS News special report is part of our continuing coverage of America at War. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
And here are some of the latest headlines. Baghdad is burning, having been hit especially hard today. The United States has finally received, just a short while ago, official permission to use Turkey's airspace as the U.S. expands its air war against Iraq and makes progress on the ground. But the news from Turkey comes with additional information that troubles the Bush administration big time. Turkey's foreign minister says his country's troops will enter northern Iraq whenever they want. That's the part of Iraq controlled by the Kurds. CBS News White House correspondent Bill Plant reports a Bush administration spokesman has told him that it would be, quote, a big mistake for Turkey to do that. We're getting reports of the direct hits in Baghdad now, among them Saddam's palaces, destroyed in the wave of air attacks on Baghdad today. More than 300 Tomahawk cruise missiles hit Baghdad, but the Pentagon continues to insist that this is a precision bomb and missile attack. Large it was, but they say it was directed at Saddam Hussein's personal palaces, command and control centers, one of the ministry buildings, but not at Baghdad's infrastructure and not at any civilian targets. U.S. troops are moving across the Kuwait-Iraq border and are arching toward Baghdad. CBS News correspondent Jim Axelrod reports the 3rd Infantry Division is now 100 miles plus into Iraq, and CBS News has just been told a short while ago that the 3rd Infantry has now crossed the Euphrates River and is operating, at least in some degree, in the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley. That's a shorter route to Baghdad than would have been staying west of the Euphrates. It's about a third of the way to Baghdad for the U.S. ground troops thus far. Now, with us in our Washington bureau, and we're very happy that he's come in, is the Turkish ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Faruk Loğlu. Ambassador, we thank you for coming in. Can you please put in perspective and context for us what's going on today with the Turkish foreign minister saying that Turkey would move its troops into northern Iraq if it wanted to? Now, no timeline was given, but as you know, the Bush administration is very concerned about this because it opposes it.
This is a subject that has been under discussion between Turkey and the U.S., not just in the last few days, but for many months. Turkey has a series of legitimate concerns that necessitates a Turkish presence in northern Iraq. First is to secure Turkish borders. The second is to address the humanitarian situation that has already arisen in Iraq, with thousands and thousands of people being displaced or turning into refugees. There is a very serious potential threat of terrorism against Turkey because northern Iraq has been a haven for terrorists that have taken actions against Turkey. So these and other considerations have necessitated a Turkish presence in northern Iraq. And we are still discussing this subject with the U.S. administration.
Mr. Ambassador, I want to ask this question with great respect for you, your government, and your people, but I also want to ask it directly. Turkey is not allowing U.S. ground troops to operate from its soil. It's been only today to say air overflights could be made. Now they're talking about moving troops into northern Iraq. Should or should not the American people still consider Turkey not just an ally, but also a friend?
Well, I believe what we have done and what we have been trying to do in the last months is very consistent with our friendship and alliance with the U.S. And this despite the fact that there is an overwhelming public opposition to a war next door in Iraq. But both the Turkish government and the Turkish parliament took this difficult decision to be part of the international coalition. Certainly it's not in the measure that the U.S. expected from us, but it's still a very crucial kind of support, not the kind of support by many other members of the coalition, which is also important, but Turkey's support is of key importance, of concrete value to the United States.
Mr. Ambassador, taking that into account, are you and your government putting the privileged and special relationship between the United States and Turkey, putting it now at risk by saying that you're going to move troops into northern Iraq?
As I said, this is a matter of serious concern and importance to Turkey, but it is a matter that we are discussing with the United States, and we want to do this not in spite of, but in cooperation with and in consultation with the United States. And that's what we are trying to accomplish. I think it is very important to remember that Turkey and the U.S. are not working at cross purposes in Iraq or even in northern Iraq. We share the same principles, we have the same commitments concerning the future of Iraq, how the different groups in Iraq should be protected. And therefore it is not two countries that are at odds with one another.
Mr. Ambassador, when will the Turkish troops move in?
This is a determination that will be made by Turkey, as I said, in consultation with the U.S. And what we are aiming at is not a pure military presence just for its own sake. I think many considerations will come into play. Most of all, of course, as the situation unfolds, we will look at the conditions, and we will be talking about these with the U.S. and then decide when and if we have to move in.
And how far south will the Turkish troops go in Iraq when and if they do move in?
I believe this is a matter that has been taken up between the Turkish and the U.S. Military, but certainly Turkey will not do anything that would be inconsistent with the objectives and the operations of the international coalition in Iraq.
Mr. Ambassador, Turkey's ambassador to the United States, we appreciate your time. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Alan Pizzi, CBS News correspondent in northern Iraq. We're going to pull up Alan live for a report again. What did you take from the Turkish ambassador's answers to the questions?
Dan, frankly, he didn't say very much that's new in the Turkish position, and something that he left out is the fact that Turkish troops entered northern Iraq more than 5 years ago on a deal they made with the Kurdish officials that they would come in and establish a limited buffer zone for a limited time in order to combat Kurdish guerrillas from Turkey who were fighting against Turkish rule in southern Turkey. That agreement expired something like 4 years ago. Turkish tanks and Turkish troops are still here. So the Kurds have no reason whatsoever to trust the Turks. And the ambassador kept talking about speaking with the Americans. Now, the Turkish leadership sent representatives to Ankara last week to hold discussions. The Turks wanted bilateral discussions between the Americans and themselves and between the Kurds and themselves. The Kurds insisted on multilateral talks. They said they got them, and they said they had assurances from the Americans that everything would be okay. The Kurds are trusting the Americans to make this deal work, and no matter what the Turkish ambassador says about Turkey's intentions and Turkey's needs, he didn't address the Kurds' concerns, and they have very real and very deep concerns, and you can't ignore the fact that, you know, the Kurds, for whatever reasons, have fought the Turks and themselves as much as they fought Saddam Hussein's forces. Right now, all they want to fight is Saddam Hussein, but they are adamant, Turks come, they're going to fight. And if the Turks do come in, then they are seriously putting a spanner in the works for the American plans for the coalition down.
Alan Pizzi reporting live from Kurdish territory in northern Iraq. The commander of Iraq's 51st Division and his top deputy have surrendered to United States Marine Forces today. A U.S. military official said this earlier. CBS News has now confirmed it. This is the first time that we know of that a commander of an Iraqi division has surrendered to the U.S.-led forces. The 51st Division is a regular Army unit that is made up mostly of conscripts. It had been deployed in southern Iraq directly in the path of the Allied invasion. So now we have, Fuad Ajami, what we were talking about before. The pace of surrender, while not yet a flood, is picking up now that we have a division commander and his top deputy, along with a lot of rank-and-file soldiers we saw earlier.
Well, we will face one question. We'll find out the truth of it. Is Iraq a one-man regime, or is it a one-party state? It's really the former. It's a one-man regime. As soon as these troops know that this regime is being decapitated, they will then trust their fate to us, and they will break with the regime. It's the gamble they have to take. The fear from the Americans on the one hand, and the fear from the killer squads to their backs on the other.
Retired General Joe Ralston, the significance of this development. A division commander, albeit with the People's Army Division, not a Republican Guard division commander, and his top deputy surrendering?
I think it's significant because this is something that can be used against other divisions when they say division commanders are giving up. Save yourself. I think that will have an impact.
Now we have this report from where the 3rd Infantry Division is moving, that in that area Republican Guard representatives moved down there rather quickly to sort of stiffen the spine, if you will, of the Iraqi commanders there, and in recent hours these reports of human shields have been placed in around some targets in Al Nasiriyah, for example. That complicates things immeasurably.
Here's the issue on human shields. First of all, this is a war crime to place human shields in front of a target. Secondly, this is what General Franks has to make decisions on, is the importance of that target at that given moment versus the loss of innocent life. And every situation is going to be different, and this is why the commander has to make that judgment.
General, there are going to be people who consider this question unfair, but there are any number of Americans, rightly or wrongly, saying, listen, nobody took these things into account when 3,000 people were killed in a single day down in lower Manhattan at the Pentagon in southwestern Pennsylvania, and there will be a strain of thought among the American people. Listen, they put human shields, we don't like it, but tough, but blow them away because we've got to keep moving.
Well, here's the counter to that argument. The U.S. military follows the laws of armed conflict, and you have to consider the proportionality to that. You have to consider the critical situation that you're dealing with, the time, and our commanders are trained from day one to do that. And in spite of the emotions that get involved here, we follow the law.
General Ralston, thanks. CBS News correspondent Randall Pinkston is in Amman, Jordan, where he's been sampling reaction from the Arab street there. Randall?
Dan, to say that there is anger and rage throughout Arab capitals would be an understatement. It's erupting everywhere. The largest demonstration in Yemen, the capital city, Sana'a, where some 30,000 protesters marched on the U.S. embassy. When they attempted to charge the embassy, police fired their weapons into the air. 2 people were killed, including an 11-year-old boy and a police officer. In Cairo, Egypt, another violent clash. 10,000 demonstrators tossed rocks and furniture at riot police. The police responded with their batons and water cannon. And here in Amman, Jordan, more clashes when police used tear gas to quell a demonstration right outside Amman at a refugee camp. Of course, leaders of governments of Arab nations are rather concerned. They're concerned about the protests. They're concerned about the protests spiraling out of control, because the people are not only angry at the U.S. for the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq, they're also angry at their nation's leaders. They claim that those leaders did not do enough to try to avert war. So it's really not so much about supporting Saddam Hussein as it is about opposing the U.S. and the viewpoint that the U.S. is interfering in the affairs of a sovereign government. At one demonstration today, a man said that the inspections seem to be working. Why didn't the U.S. let them proceed? Of course, it's too late for that now, but in the minds of the protesters, it's still a valid issue. There was one cleric today who, in addition to denouncing the U.S., took the occasion in his Friday sermon to denounce Saddam Hussein, calling on Iraqis to overthrow Saddam Hussein because he had caused so much suffering, not only for Iraqi people, but also for Arabs throughout the region. Dan?
Randall Pinkston reporting from Amman, Jordan. Jordan has a long connection with Iraq. It was among the nations that kept a rather strong relationship with Iraq. For one thing, trade between the two countries was particularly important to Jordan. I want to come and talk to Fuad Ajami about the effect in various Arab countries, various Arab streets, and throughout Islam about some of these pictures we're seeing. But let's lay down a base of the pictures themselves now. The most dramatic of the day being the attacks, particularly early attacks today on Baghdad. This is what it looked like. This is what it sounded like. Some 320 Tomahawk cruise missiles, those are sea-launched missiles in the main, hit Baghdad. Fixed-wing aircraft were involved in the attacks as well. The U.S. Defense Department went to some lengths to say these attacks were, again, what they call, quote, precisely targeted. Among the places hit today, the old palace grounds, not the palace itself, not the main, most ornate palace, but a building on the palace grounds. That old palace runs for many acres along the Tigris River. It was hit. One of the ministry buildings was hit. We don't know whether the foreign ministry was hit again today. This is a satellite picture of Baghdad. See with the foreign ministry up. The Council of Ministries was hit today. The presidential palace, the old palace, was hit. The presidential residence area was hit also along the Tigris River. And also south of Baghdad, if we go back to the pictures each time, I think we can see it. One in the distance, great explosion and great cloud of smoke came from south of Baghdad. There is an oil refinery down there. There are also some elite Republican Guard units down there. Now, these particular scenes were from near the city center. This is a medium wide shot, we'll call it. And you can see why this was dubbed shock and awe. That if you're in Baghdad, whether you're a target or not, and you see and hear this, there has to be an element of shock and awe. But the key thing is whether it's enough to get Iraqi military commanders to say, enough, we know when we're outgunned, we know when it's hopeless, and we're going to give up. Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld made it clear today that that was one of the purposes, perhaps the main purpose, of this escalated attack on Baghdad today. Now, while it unquestionably was the long-heralded major aerial bombardment, it was not the ultimate bombardment that the United States could deliver, because the United States has the capability of delivering many more hundreds of cruise missiles today, over 300, but we could deliver thousands of such missiles if we chose to do so. And also, we've talked about it before, the so-called E-bomb that could knock out everything with a transistor, in effect knock out all the electricity. That so-called E-bomb has not, at least not yet, been used. Now, when you see those pictures, you say to yourself, whew, it's a nightmare. And by any measurement, by any reasonable analysis, it is for many people, while every effort is being made to keep civilian casualties as low as possible. When you hit that way, that many targets, as eyewitnesses in Baghdad, including our most dependable one, David Chater, says, well, listen, the hospitals fill up because in those target areas, the presidential residence area, the president palace area, the cultural ministry area, there were people around there, and they wind up going to hospitals. And he described rather graphically how hospitals are filling up. That is not the desire of this attack. The desire, as specifically outlined by General Myers, the U.S. Military Chief of Staff, and Donald Rumsfeld today, was their basic argument is that we're trying to shorten the war. We're trying to be as surgical as possible with our strikes. We don't target civilians. We're not targeting infrastructure. And the reason we did this today is we want to encourage those Iraqi commanders to give up. Now, with all that in the background, we turn to Fuad Ajami, an expert who's walked the many Arab streets. Fuad, you heard Randall Pinkston's report from Jordan, where there's a large Palestinian population. Sure. How much of this can we expect, and how important is it, the rising tide of anger and resentment against the United States, or is it too much to describe it as a rising tide?
I think it's very interesting because there is a split here between the rulers and the ruled. You have the people in the streets of Amman feeling the pain, feeling the hurt, feeling the humiliations of these photos, if you will. But then you have the young king of Jordan, Abdullah II. He's actually flipped. Last time around, when we covered the last Gulf War, in 1990-91. His father, King Hussein, sided with Saddam Hussein. This time this young king made the right call, and he sided with the Americans. So there is pain and there is anger in the Arab street, but there is subtlety and diplomacy in Arab political life in these surrounding countries. We have our missiles that are hitting Baghdad are going through Saudi airspace. We have a presence in Jordan to the west of Iraq. We have a presence in Kuwait. We have a presence in Qatar, where our air base is. So this war is being waged from Arab lands, and it's a truth. And it tells you this duality, if you will, the difference between what the rulers are doing and what the ruled feel.
Fair or unfair, the comment of those who don't like what the United States is doing, some who do, to say this is the empire of the 21st century, that America now with this becomes an imperial power.
Well, with the national seminar, we're allowed in Professor Rather's office here, we can say one thing. We know in the Muslim world, the seminal moment was when Bonaparte's armies came and invaded Egypt in 1798. For nearly 2 centuries, it's been the same. These empires come and go. They really come and go. Our imperial hegemony, our imperial preponderance is larger than anything that has ever existed in modern time. So we sit astride the world, but out there, empires always have a nemesis, the hatred people feel for them, the resentment. And so it's this fight between our imperial power, the attraction to our imperial power, and the resentments people feel toward this imperial power.
And those who say, listen, it gets down to money, what it's really about is oil. That's what it's about. You say what?
Well, you know, I think there are some people you can never conciliate. There are some suspicions you can never allay. So there is no way we can go walk the streets of the Arab world and the Islamic world and tell them this is not about oil. We can't even convince the French that this is not about oil, let alone the Arabs and the Muslims. But our war is just, and it will be vindicated. This really is the most important thing. It will be vindicated by the Iraqis themselves when they accept our war and our presence. They will make the people marching in the streets of Paris and the streets of Cairo, I think they'll make them think yet again.
Well, Jami, thanks. Dateline, the United Nations, Iraq's UN ambassador has now accused UN Secretary General Kofi Annan of helping the United States attack his country. He said that Kofi Annan did that by offering to take over the oil for food program and by withdrawing peacekeepers from Kuwait. Well, we'll see how far he gets with that argument, but this could be read, not necessarily so, could be read as a further unraveling of the Iraqi hopes of isolating the United States completely from the world organization, isolating at least the United States and Britain primarily from the rest of the world. Now, Dateline Washington, in escalating the aerial bombardment of Iraq today, U.S. commanders crossed a threshold in a psychological campaign that's meant to unravel the Iraqi government. This is what we've been talking about when we show you the pictures today of Baghdad once again burning and burning it as it has never burned in this particular way. That is, so many munitions delivered on it, but this is different from the 1991 bombing campaign in that infrastructure is not being targeted. Some of the Republican Guard units are being targeted in an effort to bring attrition to their ranks, so when the 3rd Infantry Division and the U.S. Marines and the British forces get up there, if they have to fight them, they won't have to fight so many, but also to convince Iraqi commanders to surrender. Administration officials in Washington are hoping that the promise of hundreds more airstrikes around the country, plus the rapid advance of the American-led ground forces from the south toward the very gates of Baghdad, may influence key people around President Saddam Hussein, particularly his inner circle, to turn on him. Now, Secretary Rumsfeld said after these attacks today, in fact, as the smoke hadn't cleared from them, when Secretary Rumsfeld said they, meaning the Iraqis, are beginning to realize that the regime is, quote, history. On the ground, for our own CBS News reporters have reported in recent minutes, over the last half hour or so, that the 3rd Infantry Division has crossed the Euphrates River and is now operating in the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley. They have experienced some fierce fighting, including some tank warfare. Tank-killing helicopters on the U.S. side have been very active. They've met determined resistance around al-Nasiriyah. They've seen no surrendering Iraqis in that particular area around Nasiriyah, and human shields are reported, not confirmed, but reported from various sources to be being used in Nasiriyah. And as far as the Turks are concerned, the Turkish foreign minister said today that Turkish troops would enter northern Iraq. President Bush and his administration has made it clear they don't want that to happen. The Turkish ambassador to the United States has told CBS News that he's in conversations with the administration. This is CBS News continuing coverage of America at War. This is Dan Rather at CBS News World Headquarters in New York. It is coming up soon, about 5 minutes of, in fact, it's just past 5 minutes of 6 in New York. In Baghdad, let's check the clock up there. Sometimes get confused about it. It's 5 minutes to 8 in the morning, Baghdad time. 2 a.m. Let me square this away for you. There's 8 hours time difference, and sometimes we get confused. 5 minutes of 6 in the east. It's 5 minutes of 2 a.m. In Baghdad. Still lots of dark left for some airstrike possibilities. There have been strong, big airstrikes in a number of places around Iraq today, not just in Baghdad, but Baghdad was a central point of a very large attack. Let's go to Richard Schlesinger and retired U.S. Army General Buck Kernan, who are going to work the maps once again. Richard, let's get to it.
Dan, you know, one of the prime objectives of this operation is to secure the oil fields of Iraq, which are extensive both in the south and in the north. General, I know you've never been asked to secure an oil field, but I know you're also very familiar with the tactics. What's involved in doing that? I mean, it seems to me you need to step pretty lightly because there's a lot of flammable material.
Well, yes, there is, Richard, but the first thing you want to do is a threat assessment. What are you up against? What potentially threatens those oil fields? If there's an armored force, obviously you would have a complementary capability to defeat that armored force. If we're dealing with terrorists or we're dealing with dismounted people, we would first of all look at
dismounted, meaning guys just walking around.
Walking in there. You got to remember, these oil fields are huge. They're huge. It's not like securing a mall, a shopping mall. And these things go on for tens of hundreds of kilometers. So you're going to have to be very selective as to how you employ your forces.
So you need to know what you're up against first. In order to do that, you would use surveillance aircraft, or?
Yeah, you'd know first of all what's the threat in the area. If there are no armored threat and there's, for instance, foot-mounted infantry or something like that, or terrorists, you would use a different type of capability. Things like the Kiowa Warrior, a helicopter that has extensive surveillance systems on board. It can see for great distances in day and night.
So it has infrared, has radar.
Right.
So
it has the ability. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to ask you, how close did you have to come to the threat, to the bad guys, with this helicopter?
You can stand off quite a bit. And of course, in these open expanses, you can see a very long range. And it has the capability of also, it's armed. It has both Stingers and Hellfire missiles on board, either or. It has machine guns on there. And it has a reach-back capability. It can call back to artillery if it needed additional support.
So it's a pretty flexible system. It's a pretty flexible helicopter.
Yeah.
So once you determine what's in there, and we have to assume that the threat in these oil fields of Iraq is guys with explosives.
Yeah, probably terrorists.
Who might want to set them on fire. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Right.
4-star general, I'm telling you, secure that oil field, General. What would you do? How would you do it?
Well, you couldn't secure every derrick. You'd look at the pipeline. You'd look at the refineries, the pumping stations, those critical nodes that would protect the oil itself. So the refineries, those kinds of things are where you'd concentrate your efforts. And then you'd probably try to use whatever surveillance systems and sensors you had to keep people from being able to come into the oil field.
I think a lot of people have the sense that when we talk about securing an airfield, an oil field, pardon me, you have this image of an armed U.S. soldier with an M16 standing in front of every derrick.
That'd be troop intensive. That would just take too much of our combat power. We'd probably position some reaction forces in there. We'd do a broad surveillance of the area. We may, on some of these fixed locations, like the refineries, the pumping stations, we may place people directly there and put some denial barrier material around there to keep people from getting in there.
So you seal them off
Yeah.
until it's safe.
Right.
Okay, General. Thanks very much. Dan, back to you.
Richard Schlesinger with General Kernan. We thank you. General Joe Ralston, I want to ask you quickly, we haven't heard much about Basra. It was supposed to be an early target at my last report, while Basra had been in some ways, if not encircled. I don't remember anybody saying Basra had been taken.
I haven't heard that either.
Well, we'll check on it because that's a development we've kind of let slide. You're watching CBS News continuing coverage of America at War.
From your news and information leader,